All right, so Jason Goff is here, and I did a lot of Bulls research. The Bulls are the ugly duckling of the 2023 summer. They're not in any conversations. Nobody knows whether they're a buyer or a seller, whether they matter, whether they don't matter. You could make a case they're the most interesting team, the least interesting team. I'm sure you're in the fray there in Chicago, trying to figure out ways to talk about them. I'm going to start here. Derrick Rose blows out his knee in that Philly series in 2012 at the end of game one that they're winning.
I was on the baseline for that. Yep.
Yeah. Has anything good happened since then? We're not talking 11 plus years and basically 12 seasons / postseasons. Is this an official, you can point to that and go, oh God, since that, what's been good?
I mean, there's a direct line of demarcation in terms of Bulls fans' hopes and dreams that could be achieved as opposed to what you were trying to get back to. And since the feeling was so short, like you mentioned it, and there's a few things that I'll never, ever forget is where I was when Goran Dragic dared go upstairs with Derrick Rose. I was in the press box in that weird, funky Phoenix, situation up there in the second level where you got to look at people that are fans and say, that's what he kind of does. And then on the baseline, me and Agray Sam walking back towards the media room, thinking that the game was, getting ready to wrap up, beat the horde, the whole media horde that's coming back there, and you see him go down. And from that moment on, asking his brothers and talking to people around him, and then the whole, is he going to play? Is he not going to play? And then the stuff being leaked about his teammates taking care of him in practice and how he should be out there on the court. Like all the things that happened from that moment, it was such a sour point in Chicago sports history that definitely is going to probably be something 15, 20 years from now that we'll be looking at as one of those times where we just caught a bad break as a fan base. I mean, Gale Sayers and Dick Butkus never played in meaningful football games, right? Like you look at the careers of Andre Dawson and Billy Williams and characters like that, and you're like, man, those players really never got a chance to shine on a real stage. Derrick Rose was going to be that post-Jordan reintroduction, not only to relevancy, but to expectation. Because we went through Kirk Heinrich, Andres Nocioni, Ben Gordon, and that spunky Bull squad that were there to take you to 6, but we always knew what it was going to be. And then Derrick popped into the scene. And from that point on, the Jimmy Butler coming of age, the Tom Thibodeau interactions with John Paxson and the front office. I mean, from that point on, you can see the dominoes begin to drop. And that's exactly how it happens when you're planning on something being there for 7 to 10 years and being at a certain level and it just dropping off the map. And then all of a sudden you having to scrape together pieces and put together things. And all of a sudden egos get in the way. And on top of that, that core that he grew up with started to get older, right? That window started to dissipate without him. So yeah, if you want to talk about Bulls basketball, you can look at that as a clear line of demarcation.
Yeah, you think in the 2012-13 season, Noah was first team All-NBA, and I think I might have voted for him like 3rd or 4th for MVP that year. He was awesome.
I think he was top 5 or something like that year. Yeah.
Butler was coming on, and you had all the pieces.
Lou was still, healthy enough. Right. Yeah. And he had already gone through his issues with the training staff and the organization. Like there was a buildup to that point, and you got the comment and you got a chance to take a picture of it, and somebody came through and burned your Polaroid. So you would never have a memory of that either. Like we watch mixtapes quite often around these parts when it comes to yearning for that old Derrick Rose sensation of feeling. I know I do. I'm not going to front.
Yeah.
He's the reason why my career, I think, took the turn that it took, because I covered him from the moment he stepped into the game.
And it was an unbelievable, it's weird to say this, but a break for LeBron in Miami and Cleveland where he loses Dwight Howard. Dwight Howard's like first team All-NBA for like 6 straight years. He goes sideways, ends up switching conferences. Rose gets bounced. Yeah. And then it's like, who's even in the East to go through for years and years and years? It would have been Rose.
Your guy, rookie year, right?
Yeah.
I mean, come on, Jason Tatum. He was
right, but he shows up in 2017. Like, it probably would have been Rose, would have been the guy.
Paul George was still in that mix too, in Indiana. Yeah.
I went back. I looked at every season since the season after Rose got hurt. So 2012-13 on, and tried to figure out how many teams have not had a top 8 record over that span. And the answer was 7 teams. It was Detroit, it was Orlando, Washington, Minnesota, New Orleans, Charlotte, and Chicago. And you look at those 7 teams, and it's like, 5 small market teams, Washington, who can't stay out of their own way, but then the Bulls, who, are in the 3rd biggest market in the league, that have the Jordan legacy and all that. Then you start doing more digging. They've paid the luxury tax once in the history of the franchise, right? They got lucky with high lottery picks 3 times, and it ended up being Wendell Carter 7th, Kobe White 7th, Patrick Williams 4th. And you could go through those drafts and go, should have taken that, should have taken that. But it was more, really the bad luck was they were pretty close to Luka and Trey that draft, but they're 2 back, and it just kind of never happened. The last All-Star they drafted was Jimmy Butler in 2011. They've had 4 first-round exits and 2 second-round exits. They were only bottom 5 once. They're the classic definition of you never want to be in the middle, right?
NBA
you think
hell.
of that, you think of the Bulls.
Yeah, NBA hell, treadmill, and mediocrity, whatever you want to call it. Not bad enough to get that top pick. Not good enough to really contend for anything material, especially here. Like you mentioned, we witness, and I witnessed as a kid and then growing up, one of the great dynasties of all time in sports. And, the early 90s Bulls, I knew what I was going to be doing every June for 8 years. So it's tough to wrap your head around it. And also some of the things that didn't happen along the way, like you mentioned, the kicking of the tires of Klay Thompson in that draft and not coming up with him. The reportedly being told by Tom Thibodeau and other people in that organization, hey, not Marcus Teague, Draymond Green. The little things that as you go along, and I'm sure every city and every organization has these little things, but when you, like you mentioned, the 3rd market, you can't really hide behind, okay, it's not a destination spot. There are plenty of NBA players who live here during the summer and understand that that's pretty much all they have to do.
And you've also signed big free agents. Like, it's not like you haven't, but they just were at the wrong points of their careers, right?
Ben Wallace, Carlos Boozer.
Dwayne Wade. Pulled him from Miami. But at the time, it was a big deal. Then it turned out it wasn't.
Yeah, but that was at the time, too, where we were talking about the 3 alphas and knowing that wasn't going to work with Rajon Rondo, Jimmy Butler, and Dwayne Wade. Like, certain things, it just seemed like it would be great if it did work. But the expectation was, okay, this is just treading water at this point. And the specter, like you mentioned, the specter of Michael Jordan. This is just finally getting ready to be the generation that doesn't have that kind of hold outside of the shoes. A lot of people don't want to come here for that kind of smoke, and I don't want you here if you don't. But at the same time, we find out that a lot of people don't want that smoke in other cities. It's probably not going to be readily available for them here in Chicago and be able to be digested properly.
It doesn't make sense. Like, if we just levitate 40,000 feet away, it's like, how are the Bulls not good for 12 years? That's fucking stupid.
Hey, 98, I keep saying it, and I say it on my pod, 98 is my 85 for years. And years and years and years. The 85 Bears ruled not only the nation, but they ruled this town from the moment they won that Super Bowl on. And I would always look around, and whenever I had a microphone when I was a kid or coming up, I would always ask, like, man, that's a long time. When I went to Atlanta, the fact that they hadn't won a championship in the sport that they love the most, which is college football, since Herschel Walker, outside of these last couple where they went crazy with Kirby Smart. It's like certain places you think, like, how the hell is this not occurring in a place that loves it this much? Like, what is really at the root of it? And management decisions, sticking with management, treating things like, Jerry Reinsdorf and the Reinsdorf family has always treated their organizations like an insular family kind of situation. Even with the minority shares in certain groups, they are of the understanding we put people in position to do jobs, but they sometimes, if you're hired by the Reinsdorfs, you've probably got a job for life if you do things to their liking or to their understanding. If you can explain things, the same thing with the White Sox, and as I look at it, Gar Forman and John Paxson might have gone on far too long, but they were allowed to make the mistakes and make the moves that they were allowed to make, along with drafting Jimmy Butler and guys like that. So it was, nothing's linear, right? So it was jagged enough to keep it, but at the same time, in this league where you have to draw in free agents and you have to make things attractive, you look at what Brooklyn did for the longest time, they were sitting there waiting for somebody to drop into this nest of the way it come about, and all of a sudden, Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant show up and they blow up their culture. Like the Bulls seemingly have been building this thing where it's like, okay, at some point somebody's going to drop in here. Nobody's dropped in, so you gotta stay relevant. You got to keep butts in the seats. And now Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan are cast with, the expectations of contending, but at the same time, what's your ceiling is no shade to them because they're two terrific players, but what's your ceiling when they're the guys? So Bulls fans have found themselves in this kind of cycle for a while now.
Well, that's why you're here. More importantly, that's why I'm here. Because I think you need some outside help. I've put some real thought into this.
What you gonna do for me? Come on. Make my summer better.
So this is why I think they're the stealth most interesting team of the offseason.
Okay.
They solve a lot of problems for other teams, right? But it would require the Bulls going, what are we doing? Let's blow this up. Let's just, why are we going to pay Vucevic? He's a free agent. Are we really going to extend DeRozan for a couple more years into his mid-30s? He's on this great contract. Why don't we trade him right now? LaVine, who's got 4 years left for big bucks. A lot of teams, we just saw with Bradley Beal, that's the worst case scenario because he had no trade clause. But if I was running the Bulls, I would blow it up and start over. And I think you go through some of the teams that need people, right? Let's look at Miami. Everyone's like, well, Dame's going to go to Miami. Is he? Are we positive? There's a lot of teams that are going to go after Dame. And what happens if Miami doesn't get Dame? Because right now they're already basically almost a second apron team. They have Gabe Vincent and they have Strus coming as I'm sure they're going to want to resign those guys. And they have Lowry as an expiring. And the move right now is to trade Lowry for something or Hero for something or both. And if they don't get Dame, why wouldn't they turn Hero into DeRozan or Lowry and some picks into DeRozan? DeRozan would be the second call if I knew I wasn't going to get Dame, right? Then he one more score. And if I'm Chicago, I'm just sitting there hey, we'll figure this out. If I could turn DeRozan into Hero, I would do that in a heartbeat. That's one team. The Portland piece of this, as you know, you have this Portland pick and it's top 14 protected until 2075. It just keeps rolling over year after year after year.
Right.
But it's bad for Portland because that means they can't put other picks in their trades, right? So it looks like Dame might stay. Or they're going to go through the facade of him staying. Well, if he's going to stay, they got to trade some stuff to kind of put pieces around him. But you can't do that if you have this protection thing. Well, here are the Bulls. We'll waive the protection. Let's talk deal. You got Simmons. We got DeRozan. We could waive some protection, move some stuff around.
It's interesting to me that you keep putting DeRozan in these deals. Why aren't you putting Zach LaVine in these deals?
Oh, I have Zach coming. Don't you worry.
Okay.
He's coming after the break. I'm just
trying to see what the market is looking like. All right,
he's coming after the break. But you have also Vucevic, and if Portland is panicking and they want to win now, couldn't you do a DeRozan-Vucevic combo? Sign and trade, get Simmons back, get a bunch of picks back, take Nurkic's crappy contract back, and basically just start over and send both of those guys out?
I think the Lonzo Ball piece of this is very, very apparent because I think that Arturas Karnisovas and Mark Eversley saw what that 2.5 months before the All-Star break looked like, and that gives them fuel, in my estimation. And not that Lonzo's going to come back. Fuel which way? Not that Lonzo's going to come back, but if that piece is understood or solved or managed a little bit better, that point guard piece, then this team is different. I mean, Patrick Beverley was on this team when they went 14-9 down the stretch. And trust me, I'm not the guy that's selling all that to you. What I'm telling you is for that to happen, I think that those guys who have been put in full space command by the Reinsdorfs and Michael Reinsdorf himself, he said, hey, these guys, they have been delegated this power. This is what they want to do. If that's the case, right? If they're looking at this as being a point guard away, then the moment you send the guy that you paid $215 million to out after the first year of a 5-year deal, Zach, then now you're telling everybody, okay, all right, maybe the development plan that we talked about when we got this gig, That got thrown out the window the moment you went to go get Vucevic. All right, maybe the continuity plan that we talked about after we traded for Vucevic, now that goes out the window because we're trading Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan. At some point, the clock starts on these guys, and I think they're still trying to figure out if that clock can stay delayed while they're trying to figure out the point guard position themselves. Like, I think the Bulls think that they might, be kicking the tires on some certain players as well. I don't think this is an offload. I think these are two-way conversations that are happening around the Bulls players.
Yeah, because you mentioned on your pod, you thought they were a stealth Chris Paul destination.
Hey, listen,
before the Golden State trade, right?
I wanted it for the story alone. I wanted it for the fact that Chris Paul, I think, is still good for 20 games during the regular season and hopefully the 15, 16 that matter in the postseason. But yeah, they need something. That's the reason why Patrick Beverley is calling, Karl Anthony Towns one of the best players he's ever seen. That's why he's saying what he's saying about Zach, because he understands that the Bulls are still looking for that point guard position to be filled. And they think that the Miami Heat team that beat them when they had 3-minute and 45-second lead in that playing game, I think there's some thinking that they are closer to that than they are to Orlando and Charlotte and all these other teams.
Zach Lowe wrote about this for ESPN this week about what did other teams learn from the Heat. Like, was it an aberration or was it replicable? Which I thought was a really good angle. If you're the Bulls, do you just watch the tape of that playing game and go, man, that could have been us? I personally think that's insane.
Hey, Bill, we're not talking listen, I am ready for something else. Okay?
Yeah.
Right? I'm ready for that feeling that I had when, and it's going to sound crazy, like I remember the baby Bulls with Tyson and Eddie. I'm not saying I'm ready for that, but what I'm saying is, like, I'm ready for
mindset.
A reset. And I think that the fan base wouldn't be mad at you at this point. Now, what happens in the building is different, right? The fans don't pay your salary. The fans don't veto and accept trades. So what I think is not important here. I thought this thing had reached its ceiling at the end of last year. So
right. Well, but the Lonzo piece, it sounds like Lonzo's out for this upcoming season.
No, they've declared him out.
Yeah. So they can there's some sort of injury exception that they could use like $10 million. But the problem is if they bring Vucevic back and they re-sign at least a couple of those guys, now they're close to the second apron, and that's before they would use the extra money to get whatever point guard they want. The Lonzo thing's really sad. And if you were, it's too early to do a curse of the Bulls thing with the Derrick Rose injury. It's only been 12 years, but that's fucking weird. Like, he goes to the Bulls and he gets hurt within 2 months. And there was a moment there that first season when it was like, oh, something's going on here. And then it was over immediately.
You know what it felt like? It felt like when I was in Atlanta, when they had they would always get out to those starts, and Josh Smith would be talked about as an all-star, and you know what I mean? And then we get there, look, they got 3 all-stars starting the all-star game or something like that. And it's like, all right, let's stop talking about playoff seasons. Let's start talking about championships. And when it's time to winning time, I think certain people excuse themselves. Zach
LaVine, you've watched him for a couple years now. 9 seasons, 4 total playoff games, plus a playing game. Last 5 years, 25, 5, and 5, basically. 48, 39, and 84 percentage splits. Really good. On the books for 40, 43, 46, and then a $49 million player option. He's never probably going to be better than he is now. Do you trade him? And what's his market? The market's higher than Bradley Beal because he doesn't have a no trade clause. You have teams like, I don't know, the Clippers, if they wanted to put Paul George on the table and mix it up. The Knicks, I'm sure, would want to dive in. Philly, if they wanted to do a little maxi Tobias Harris. Portland, who we could talk about again. And then Miami would be the other one if they don't get Dame. You've watched him in and out every day for a couple years now. Can you win a title if he's your second best player?
Depends on who your first best player is. If your best player is Jokic or one of these 5 that we talk about all the time, then I believe so. I think, I think Zach LaVine is going to settle into, and this is no disrespect because this is, I think, one of the highest honors I can give somebody in terms of how I respect his game. You remember Milwaukee Ray Allen? Milwaukee Ray Allen scoring 25 a game, 24 a game, catching people at the rim, super athletic, super agile, had the smoothest handle, terrific shooter. And then he turns into Seattle Ray. where it's more to extending towards the 3-point line, doesn't have to do as much. Part of that first Splash Brothers crew with him and Rashard Lewis. And then he goes to Boston, and then he goes to Miami, and then you see the purest form of this is what Ray Allen's going to do for you. I think Zach LaVine's right now. Zach LaVine has proved it to himself that he is this good. He's proved it to the rest of the NBA that he is this good. He was on Team USA. All these things have happened. Now, if Zach LaVine starts to look around and he has to play second fiddle some nights, and I'm not saying that this is an issue, but what I'm saying is, at the end of the stretch, especially the last 15 games or so of the season, when you knew DeMar DeRozan had that right hip adductor issue, and there was still moments where Zach LaVine is getting the ball to DeMar in the end of game situations, or DeMar is the end game decision maker, in terms of ball handling at the end.
Yeah.
Like, that to me, it's kind of like when Lowry and Zach were playing together 3 years ago, and I never saw a pick and roll, pick and fade, pick and pop with those guys. It's like, hey, man, at some point you're going to have to figure out if your two best players can play with each other. Now we're at the point where it's like, at some point, Zach's not going to be able to iron out these late game decision-making issues or these late game shot selection issues if he is not regularly getting those repetitions. So I think Zach right now is everything that you say those numbers say he is and more. I think he's become a better defender, right? Now that probably makes him, an average one, if you're being kind. But at some point, you're going to have to just put the basketball in his hand and say, make all the mistakes. The game will tell you the truth. The game will tell him exactly who he is and who he isn't. But this back and forth, ever since DeMar DeRozan has kind of dropped in your lap these last couple of years after being on a free agent market that really wasn't checking for him, he's been on the prove it that I'm DeMar DeRozan, I'm still the dude run. And I'm not mad at that either, because that's what's got him here. But at the same time, if we're going to continue to see some of the things that make you scratch your head about Zach in some late game situations, at what point is he going to get a chance to iron those things out? It can't be a pop quiz every night, right? It's got to be a consistent test. And
so you're done. You're done with these two as a combo.
I think
you're at the pick one stage.
And I think that you reached the level that you can, the highest ceiling that you could possibly reach with them. Like it's not a knock on them. It's just with those two guys, especially when Vooch is on the court. Like for the last 2 years, Vooch has had to change his game demonstrably so, because he gets his points in the same area that DeMar DeRozan gets his. That high elbow, that post play. Like DeMar's not going out there for three. So the way the teams put together and the way that those two guys play off of each other and sometimes don't play off of each other, I think that you've reached your ceiling with this group. And we'll see, because they believe in the continuity and they believe that they haven't had a real chance to play together.
Who believes in it?
Arturas Karnisovas and Mark Eversley have preached.
So the front office believes in it, and then
they preach continuity.
And the ownership's like, we believe in it as long as you don't pay the luxury tax. Cool, thanks.
Hey, the message is in the results. The message is right there in the results for anybody to see.
It sure is. So I made up some LaVine trades. And I don't really love any of them. I think he's in a weird spot with the amount of money he makes. But
yeah. It's hard to look at Jamal Murray's deal and look at his and be like, man, these two dudes make the same amount of money, right?
Like if the
owner's going to learn that max contracts only hurt them if we're talking about true value. Like you should be able to pay somebody appreciably more if they are at a different level, and if a person has achieved a different level. And I know there's little caveats in the CBA that bring that along, but to really accentuate it, if I'm making $85 million and the dude who is similar to me is making $47 million or $60 million down the road, then who's really hurting who here if we're talking about max value for all these organizations?
Sometimes it's just the situation you were in when that deal became available.
Jamal was hurt. Yeah.
Could Miami try to trade for him and do Hero and some picks? That's probably that's a good Dame backup.
Yeah, I would think that, that, or the New York thing where I've seen RJ.
You'd have
Barrett,
to get RJ back, right?
Yeah, RJ Barrett, Mitchell Robinson, a pick or something like that. I would figure out what you would do with Mitchell Robinson and Vooch on the same roster. But like Zach Zach has a few places he could probably drop in. It's just, do the Bulls want to accept whatever that is coming back? You know, the Bulls don't really do the tanking rebuild thing. And when they,
but it makes more sense for them to have RJ Barrett than Zach LaVine if they're just going to be in the middle. I'd rather have the guy who's 5-6 years younger and is less expensive. You know?
Yeah. It gives them, Zach gives them a professional, big city face for the NBA. You know, I mean, the things that matter in terms of, you know, the United Center being dinner theater, if they're not contending, matter still. You know?
Yeah, see, I think I'm not a gigantic fan, but I'm not against him either. But I actually think of LaVine.
Okay.
I think he's weirdly underrated as an asset, though. And like the most underrated guy now is Ayton. The Ayton stuff's ridiculous. Like Mark Stein had a thing today in his newsletter that Dallas was going to trade Hardaway and Rashawn Holmes for DeAndre Ayton, but they insisted on including JaVale McGee, and Phoenix is like, too rich for our blood. Right. And I'm thinking like, Dallas, just take DeAndre Ayton. It's Tim Hardaway and Rashawn Holmes. That's it. That's all it took. What are you guys doing? DeAndre Ayton's good. But now, so he's been like, just, I don't know what happened to him. LaVine is like, it feels like he's available. He's a 25-5-5 guy. But yet there's no, like Dame Lillard is on First Take every day. Where's he going? Where's he going? There's like no LaVine conversation at all. So I don't know where he should be.
You know, I think that speaks to the overall relevancy of the Bulls, though. Right?
Yeah,
like, yeah, 100%. Right? Like,
yeah,
why aren't we talking about Brandon Ingram? Right? Like, if New Orleans can't move Zion and they got to change up that chemistry and they can't move CJ, like, these are the things where.
So Brandon Ingram for LaVine? I don't think I'd do that, but I like Ingram more than LaVine. That's a good one, though. That's a good fake one.
Who do you think affects winning more?
I think Ingram. I really thought Ingram the last couple months of last season. I was really impressed. I thought he went up a level. I haven't seen Zach go up a level as like a two-way. I'm dragging my team to like a 9-1 over 10 games record.
You know where Zach has gone up a level, and it's so crazy because Will Perdue and Kendall Gill and I talk about this often. He has refined his game so much so, like, we knew he was going to be a scorer, right? We knew he was going to be athletic, but the fact that he's doing it on the splits that he's doing it, like, his shot awareness has improved so much so that some of the things that he falters with still, like some of the, like I said, late game decision making, there'll be a turnover where you just like, what's going on here? But
I've noticed
some of the things that he falters on. Yeah, man, I don't think he's talked about, because I don't think the Bulls are talked about on the national stage nearly enough as they should be. And when they were talked about, it was because it was like, hey, look at the Bulls. They're the number one seed in the East and going into the All-Star break. And then people could settle back because of the injury, could settle back into their normal reflexes when they talk about this organization, which is to not talk about it on a national stage in terms of having attractive players. But I think
NBA No Man's Land isn't exciting for a podcast segment. I'll just tell you now.
Don't get it twisted. I find all the absurdities and I laugh at all of them. I listen. I have had my Patrick Williams come to Jesus meetings, on a weekly basis during the basketball season.
Kind of like him.
I do.
I'd like to see a full season from him. Plus, he's like 21. He's like one of those super young guys.
You know what's so crazy? I feel like I said it to an Eastern Conference scout the other day. I was like, I had a dream that Patrick Williams woke up and he was the only option, not the number one option, but the only option on the team. Like the Vooch thing fell through. They traded.
So it was like full lottery, just running ISOs for him with 2 minutes left.
Hey, P-Dub, come get your 24 shots a game. You know what I mean? Let's stare down Jordan Poole out there in DC and see who could take the worst shots for the worst team.
Well, Russillo and I have a theory that like 100 guys in the league could score 20 points a game if they were on the right team.
Easy.
As we'll find out with Jordan Poole on the Wizards next year when he scores 30 a game.
Hey, Jordan Poole is about to have the time of his life in Chocolate City.
He's going to be so happy.
This is going to either go really well or really poorly. Either way, it's going to be entertaining.
So I centered on Philly.
Okay.
And Harris has an expiring and Maxey. And I think that's too much because I think Maxey, he's young. He's still rookie contract. I think teams really like him. But if you threw Caruso in that trade and that become Harris and Maxey for LaVine and Caruso, now I feel like the Bulls are giving up slightly too much. But on the other hand, I kind of like your team more because I think Harris is another guy who's a little undervalued.
Yeah,
he's just been standing in the corner for 3 years.
Yeah, I've always liked Tobias Harris. When I first saw him, I thought he would be like a really, really, really poor man's Carmelo Anthony in terms of arc to block scoring. But now he's comparing himself to cookies and all kinds of wild stuff going on.
That worries it.
The trade speculation. But no, I mean, Tyrese Maxey is fun. I picked the 76ers to win to get to the finals this year because I thought he was ascend to being their second best player. What are we talking about the goal being here for the Bulls? Are we talking about jumping into that top 4, top 5? Because does that make you better than Cleveland? Does that make you better than Boston? Does it make you better than Philly? Does that make you better than Milwaukee? Like, to make a trade and still be messing around with the play-in, I think is a thing that scares this organization the most, is because of how topsy-turvy it is. And those dudes behind you, the Orlandos and the Indianas, those cats are catching up too. So are you going to be that much better with those dudes on your team? Like, are you better than Cleveland right now if Tobias Harris, Tyrese Maxey, DeMar DeRozan, Patrick Williams, and Nikola Vucevic march out there?
Well, I mean, the Vooch is a whole other conversation, whether he even comes back. I guess what I would want if I were them was a little more flexibility and a little more youth. Because if they don't extend DeRozan, he leaves as a free agent next year. Now you've lost that asset completely. Vooch, I think it's kind of telling that a lot of teams have cap space, and we're talking about, or the ability to create some cap space.
Yeah.
We're talking about Draymond and all these other guys, and it doesn't seem like there's a Vooch market at all. And I don't even know, does Brook Lopez have a better market than Vooch? He might. He might. Because if you're going $25 million a year for Vooch, I think teams look at that and go, I'd rather pay $50 for Brook Lopez.
Yeah, but Brook doesn't have to worry about being the top 3 option on his team, and sometimes top 2, because he can't be. So that would be the flip side on Vooch is like, well, I kind of want to see him used like Sabonis was used on Sacramento. That's kind of his destiny, right? On the right team. This was not the right team for him, where he's playing with 2 like ISO heavy dudes basically. And I don't know, he used to kill the Celtics. He had to change his game. He had to change his game up because of these guys. So part of me wonders, like, if they turn LaVine and Caruso into Harris and Maxey and some assets, they kept DeRozan, they brought Vucevic back. Do I like that team more? And I kind of landed on yes. And the other one I was looking at was Paul George, but I don't know what the injury history that the Bulls have had over the last 15 years, if you want to go down the Paul George rabbit hole. But that's the one where the salaries match up, changes scenery, LaVine comes back to the West Coast. Yeah, that makes some sense. If there's one thing the Bulls fans haven't had to deal with over the last few years is load management. Either your career has been shook up for the worst,
either you're not playing at all,
or you're out here playing every game. I mean, Pat Williams just played all 82. You know, Zach. The reason why Zach's trade value could and should be high, one of the reasons that I don't think is as talked about as much as it should be, is that the NBA got a chance to see him the first year after that knee procedure, and he did the whole load management back-to-back thing because of the organization. He didn't want to do it, but he did it for the first month, and then he ended up playing 60-some-odd games in a row. So he proved to everybody that, hey, I'll be out here for at least 65 of these joints for you because I had this surgery. I'm not going to be able to play because my knee isn't working or I'm not feeling good. And it's the first year, that big deal too. So I think that makes him a that much more attractive option as well.
So it sounds like you're leaning toward pick Zach, basically trade DeRozan. Let Zach build up his value as the number one option on a team where he's now averaging 30 a game, something like that. Find some sort of point guard for him and kind of see where you are in December.
Find out what you got.
Because he'd be more of an asset in December, January if he's putting up 30 a game than he probably is right now. The trade that makes the most sense to me is DeRozan and Simmons, and the Bulls getting, they relax their protections on a pick and get another pick.
I'd do that in a heartbeat.
Dame gets another veteran.
Yeah.
Maybe you figure out a way. Could Vucevic be in that? Something. But I think having that protected pick, which is holding Portland hostage, could be used to your advantage.
I would do that in a heartbeat. You know why? Because that would ensure that the Bulls would not finish last in 3-point attempts in this modern game.
I like Simmons. To me, that's a no-brainer.
I think he came in here last year and put 40 on us or something.
Yeah,
there's a lot to be liked. And that was on the top 5, top 6 defense at the time as well. So, he's one of those dudes who I feel like if the game teaches him the feel that he needs, then he'll be nice. If not, then, shout out to Monte Ellis. But, we'll see another dude who could score at a high clip and not really, refine his game maybe as much as his organization needs him to. But
he's another secret young guy too. Yeah. So here's the thing. I think the Bulls are going to be more interesting over the next 5 days. They are like plan B for all these different teams. Like, oh, Dame's staying? Shit. We got to get him some help. Well, there's not a lot of veterans hanging around ready to be traded. And same for Miami.